Alright, hello. Hello. If anyone's watching this in the VOD, hello, hi. I hope everyone's having a wonderful time. We are gonna be reading more of the Silmarillion because somebody from YouTube really wanted me to do it. It's been a hot minute. It has been a hot minute. Let me check. My channel. Let's see. When was the last time I did this? I probably should have been better about announcing it too, but you know, it'd be like that sometimes. Was it before or after that? Let's see, when was the last time I did it? Where is it? I know it's here. I looked at it before. I just didn't, like, process the information. Shocking, huh? Wow, I actually have a lot of streams. Okay, maybe it was before what I was looking at? Was it before the Gamer Awards? I'm using the same thumbnail. God, it had to have been a long time ago at this point then. I keep scrolling. Oh yeah, I watched Independence Day. Good God. Was it pre my... No, it couldn't have been pre my Avatar debut. Where is it? Where's... Because the model's this one. And it's the one that the artwork that Perry drew for me, because Perry is a sweetheart. Where is my Silmarillion stream? Zelda, WoW, Crochet and Chat, Fall, Pokemon cards and nails. Damn, I've done some weird streams, huh? There's just one with art that says, like, the same artwork that says fishing. No other context. There it is, 5 months ago. It was post-Marvel Rivals, but it was 5 months since the last time I read the Silmarillion. Wow, it's been a while. I need those cars to stop driving. That's obnoxious. Okay. Man, that's crazy. And I was crazy once. I need to not do that. I apologize. That is my B. Okay. Last we left off, we got to the coming of the elves, and we were starting on chapter 5 of Eldamar and the princes of Eldale. Oh my god, I forgot how bad my pronunciation is going to be. I apologize so much. I am so sorry. I'm so sorry to everyone. Anyone and everyone. Okay, let's get into it. Let's read this. Just jump right in. If my background music is too loud or too quiet, let me know. I will adjust as necessary. In the time, the hosts of the Vannar and the Noldor came to the last western shores of the Hitherlands. In the north of these shores, in the ancient days after the Battle of Powers, bent ever westward, until the northernmost parts of Arda, only a narrow sea divided upon which Valinor was built, from the Hitherlands. But this narrow sea was filled with grinding ice, because of the violence of the frosts of Melkor. Therefore, Orome did not lead the hosts of Eladai into the far north, but brought them into the fair lands about the river Siron, that afterwards were named Beleriand, and from those shores whence the first Eldar looked in fear and wonder on the sea, there stretched an ocean, wide and dark and deep, and between them the mountains of Aman. Okay, I'm gonna make it so I can't hear the background music, because that was very distracting while I was trying to read. ADHD brain. Hi, Fan Wiggles! Advanced audio properties. Okay. Just monitor off. There we go. Now I can read and not, fumble. Okay. Continuing on. Now Ulmo, by the counsel of the Valar, came to the shores of Middle-earth and spoke with Eldar who waited there, gazing on the dark waves. And because of his words and the music which he made for them on his horns of shell, their fear of the sea was turned rather to desire. Therefore Ulmo uprooted an island which had long stood alone amid the sea, far from either shore, since the tumults of the fall of Ilwyn, and the acid of his servants he removed, or in the aid of his servants he removed it, as it were a mighty ship, and anchored it in the bay of Balar, into which Sirion poured his water. Then the Vynar and the Noldar embarked upon that isle, and they were drawn over the sea, and came at last to the long shores beneath the mountains of Aman, and they entered Valinor and were welcomed to its bliss. But the eastern horn of the island, which was deep grounded in the shoals off the mouths of Sirion, was broken asunder and remained behind, and that, it is said, was the Isle of Balar, to which afterwards Essay often came. But the Telari remained still in Middle-earth, for they dwelt in the East Beleren far from the sea, and they heard not the summons of Ulmo until too late. And many searched still for Elwë their lord, and without them they were unwilling to depart. But when they learned that Ingwe and Finwë and their peoples were gone, then many of the Telari pressed on to the shores of Beleriand, and dwelt there. I'm sorry, I'm like... Oh, hi, Nanashi! Hello! Where was I? They dwelt in East Beleren, far from the sea, and they heard not the summons of Ulmo until too late, and many searched still for Elwë their lord, and without him they were unwilling to depart. But when they learned that Ingwe and Finwë and their peoples were gone, then many of the Telari pressed on to the shores of Beleriand, and dwelt thereafter near the mouths of Sirion, and longing for their friends that had departed, and they took Olwë, Elwë's brother, to be their king. Long they remained by the coasts of the western sea, and Ose and Unen, I think, came to them and befriended them. And Ose instructed them, sitting upon a rock near to the margin of the land, and of him they learned all manner of sea lore and sea music. Thus it came that the Telari, who were forced from the beginning lovers of water, and the fairest singers of all the elves, were after enamored of the seas, and their songs were filled with the sound of waves upon the shore. Oh, that sounds so cool. Their songs were filled with the sounds of waves upon the shore is such a pretty line. When many years had passed, Ulmo hearkened to the praise of Noldar and Finwë their king, who grieved at the long sundering from the Telari, and besought him to bring them to Aman, if they would come. And most of them proved now willing indeed. But great was the grief of Ose when Ulmo returned to the coasts of Beleriand, to bear them away to Valinor, for his care was for the seas of Middle-earth and the shores of the Hitherlands. And he was ill pleased the voices of the Telari should be heard no more in his domain. Some he persuaded to remain, and those were Falthrim, the elves of Falas, who in after days had dwelling in the havens of Brothenbar and Elgarest, the first mariners of Middle-earth and the first makers of ships. Círdan the shipwright was their lord. The kinsfolk and friends of Elwë Singallo also remained in the Hitherlands, seeking him yet, though they would fain to have departed to Valinor and the light of the trees, if Ulmo and Olwe had been willing to tarry longer. But Olwe would be gone, and the last main host of the Talari embarked upon the isle, and Ulmo drew them far away. Then the friends of Elwë were left behind, and they called themselves Elgath, the Forsaken People. They dwelt in the woods and hills of Beleriand rather than by the sea, which filled them with sorrow, but the desire of Aman was ever in their hearts. Also, guys, even though I'm reading, feel free to chat if you want. I can always... Oh, hi, Matt. Hello. Hi, Matt. I can always, like, once I finish a paragraph, pause, look at the chat, talk with you guys, okay? This is a chill stream. But when Elwë awoke from his long trance, he came forth from Nan Almoth with Melun, and they dealt thereafter in the woods in the midst of the land. Greatly, though, he had desired to see again the light of the trees. In the face of Melun he beheld the light of Aman as an unclouded mirror, and in that light he was content. His people gathered about him in joy, and they were amazed, for fair and noble as he had been, now he appeared as it were a lord of the Maiar, his hair gray silver, tallest of all the children of Iluvatar, and his high doom was before him. Imagine you water redeem. I don't have water next to me, but I need to, actually, with the reading. So thank you, Matt, actually. Thank you for once. I can't drink anything carbonated because it'll make the reading worse. But there, I did the water redeem for you, my dude. Is the music too loud in the background, Matt? I don't want it to be too obnoxious to the reading, but I also don't want it just to be silence, especially because you might be able to hear my AC in the other room. Is it alright? It's good? Okay, thank you so much. Let's keep going. Now Ose followed after the host of Olwe, and when they were come to the Bay of Eldamar, which is Elvenholm, he called to them, and they knew his voice, and begged Ulmo to stay their voyage, and Ulmo granted their request, and at his bidding, Ose made fast the island and rooted it to the fountains of the sea. Ulmo did this the more readily, for he understood the hearts of the Talari, and in the council of Valar he had spoken against the summons, thinking that it were better for the Quendi to remain in Middle-earth. The Valar were little pleased to learn what he had done, and Finwë grieved when the Talari came not, yet more when he learned that Elwë was forsaken, and knew that he should not see him again, unless it were in the halls of Mandos. But the island was not moved again, and stood there alone in the Bay of Eldamar, and it was called Tol Eressa, the Lonely Isle. The Lonely Isle. I almost said Lonely Island like the band. Oh my god, I'm sorry. There the Talari abode as they wished under the stars of heaven, and yet within the sight of Aman and the deathless shore, and by the long sojourn apart in the lonely isle was caused by the sundering of their speech from that of the Vanar and Noldar. I'm in a boat in Middle-earth. I'm in a boat and it's going fast and gonna kill some orcs. Take me to... Shit, I'm trying to think of a Middle-earth place that rhymes with Afghan. Oh no. I'm a king of Middle-earth on a boat like me. If you own the show, Okay, I need to stop. I'm so sorry. Also, I did finally actually buy the Lord of the Rings book. So, well, I say books, but it's all in one big book. So if people end up liking me reading, that is something I can read as well. Downside is, the Fellowship of the Ring, the first half of it is them leaving the Shire. I'm not even fucking joking. That's the one of those books that I've read, and literally the first half of the first book is literally just them leaving the Shire. However, it's a really nice read because you learn a lot more about Merry and Pippin, and that they are a lot more smart and put together than the movie made them out to be. But yeah, okay. Where was I? Okay, I think there. To these, the Valar had given a land and a dwelling place. Even among the radiant flowers of the tree-lit gardens of Valinor, they longed still at times to see the stars, and therefore a gap was made in the great walls of Pelori. Sorry, Pelori made me think of Perry. I'm getting too distracted. I'm so sorry. Of Pelori, and there was a deep valley that ran down to the sea of the Eldar, raised in a high green hill. Tuna, it was called. I'm really trying. But why would you call it Tuna? Why would you call a place Tuna? Tolkien, please. I'm trying my best. I'm sorry. From the west, the light of the trees fell upon it, and its shadow lay ever eastward, and to the east it looked towards the bay of Elvenholm, and the lonely isle, and the shadowy seas. Then through the Kalkyra, the passive light, the radiance of the blessed realm streamed forth, kindling the dark waves to silver and gold, and it touched the lonely isle, and its western shore grew green and fair. There bloomed the first flowers that ever were east of the mountains of Amon. Upon the crown of I got this. I just gotta lock in. Upon the crown of Tuna, the city of elves was built. The white walls and terraces of Tiron, and the highest towers of that city was the Tower of Ingwe, Minden Eldalvia, whose silver lamp shone far out into the midst of the sea. Few are the ships of mortal men that have seen its slender beam. In Tirion, upon Tuna, the Vanar and the Noldar dwelt long in friendship, and since all the things in Valinor they loved most, the white tree. Wait, like the white tree of Gondor? Yo! Huh, okay. Yavanna made for them a tree to like a lesser image of Telpirin, save that it did not give light of its own being. Galathilion it was named in the Sindarian tongue. This tree was planted in the courts beneath the Minden, and there flourished, and its seedlings were many in Eldamar. One of these was afterwards planted in Tol Eressa, and it prospered there, and it was named Celeborn. Thence came, in the fullness of time, is elsewhere told, Nimolith, the white tree of Numenor. Yo, okay, that is the white tree of Numenor. Okay, sorry. If anyone doesn't know the book, but has seen the Lord of the Rings movies, there's the white tree that you see on the people of Gondor. That's the tree that was just referenced right there. I'm pretty sure. I'm like 85% sure. Okay. I feel like I need a book in my hands, but I don't have a book for. Well, I mean, I have a book, but I don't have a book in my model's hands. Okay. Manwë and Varda loved most the Vanar, the fair elves, but the Noldar were beloved of Alue, and he and his people came often among them. Great became their knowledge and their skill, yet even greater was their thirst for more knowledge, and in many things they soon surpassed their teachers. They were changeful in speech, for they had great love of words, and sought ever to find names more fit for all the things that they knew or imagined, and it came to pass that the masons of the house of Finwë, quarrying in its hills after stone, for they delighted in the building of high towers, first discovered the earth gems, and brought them forth in countless myriads, and they devised tools for the cutting and shaping of gems, and carved them into many forms. They hoarded them not, but gave them freely, and by their labor enriched all Valinor. Ooh, okay, cool. The Noldor afterwards came back to Middle-earth, and this tale tells mostly of their deeds. Therefore, the names and kinship of their princes may here be told, in that form which these names later bore in the tongue of the elves of Beleriand. Finwë was the king of Noldor. The sons of Finwë were Fëanor, Fingolfin, Finfarin, and the mother of Fëanor was Mirel Serinde, whereas the mother of Fingolfin in Finfarin was Indis of the Venar. Fëanor was the mightiest in skill of word and of hand, more learned than his brothers. His spirit burned as flame. Fingolfin was the strongest, and the most steadfast, and the most valiant. Finfarin was the fairest, and the most wise of heart, and afterwards he was a friend of the sons of Olwë, lord of the Telari, and had two wife, Irwen, the swan maiden of Alqualonde, Olwë's daughter. Long names. Long names. The 7 sons of Fëanor were Maedhros the tall, Malgor the mighty singer, and those whose voice was heard far over the land and sea, Celagorn the fair, Caranthir the dark, Curufin the crafty, who inherited most his father's skill of hand, and the youngest, Amrod and Amras, who were twin brothers, alike in mood and face. In later days, they were great hunters in the woods of Middle-earth, and a hunter also was Celagorm, who in Valinor was a friend of Oromwe and often followed Vala's horn. The sons of Fingolfin and Fingon were afterwards king of Noldor and in the north of the world, and Turgon, lord of Gondolin. Their sister was Arahel the White. She was younger in the years of Adar than her brothers, and when she was grown to full stature and beauty, she was tall and strong, and loved much to ride and hunt in the forest. Therefore she was often in the company of the sons of Fëanor, her kin, but to none was her heart's love given. Fennel she was called, the White Lady of the Noldor, for she was pale, though her hair was dark, and she was never arrayed in but silver and white. The sons of Finfarin were Finrod the Faithful, who afterwards was named Felagund, Lord of Caves, Orodeth, Angrod, and Aegonor. These 4 were close in friendship with the sons of Fingolfin, as though they were all but brothers. A sister they had, Galadriel, the most beautiful in all the house of Finwë. Her hair was lit with gold, as though it was caught in a mesh of radiance of Lothlorien. We've got Galadriel! Oh my god, I shouldn't be so excited for, mention of Galadriel, but I fucking am. Oh my gosh. Galadriel's a queen! Okay. Here must be told how the Telari came last to the hand of Aman. Land of Aman. I can't read. Through the long age they dwelt in Tol Eressë, but slowly their hearts were changed, and they were drawn towards the light that flowed out over the sea to the lonely isle. They were torn between the love of music of the waves upon their shores, and the desire to see again their kindred, and to look upon the splendor of Valinor. But in the end, the desire of the light was stronger. Therefore, Ulmo, submitting to the will of the Valar, sent them to Ulse, their friend. And he, though grieving, taught them to craft shipbuilding. And when their ships were built, he brought them as his parting gift many strong winged swans. Then the swans drew the white ships of the Telari over the windless sea, and thus at last and latest they came to Aman and the shores of Eldamar. There they dwelt, and if they wished, they could see the light of the trees, and they could tread golden streets of Valamar and the crystal stairs of Tiriana upon Tuna, the green hill. But most of the day they all sailed in their swift ships on the waters of the Bay of Elvenholm, or walked in the waves upon the shore with their hair gleaming in the light beyond the hill. Many jewels the Noldar gave them, opals and diamonds and pale crystals, which they strewed upon the shores and scattered in the pools. Marvelous were the beaches of Elendé in those days, and many pearls they won for themselves from the sea. And their halls were of pearl, and the pearl were the mansions of Olwe and Alaquande, the haven of the swans, lit with many lamps. For that was their city, the haven of their ships, and those were made in the likeness of swans, with beaks of gold, and eyes of gold and jet. The gate of the harbor was an arch of living rock sea-carved, and it lay upon the confines of Elamar, north of Calceria, where the light of the stars was bright and clear. As the ages passed, the Venar grew to love the land of the Valar and the full light of the trees, and they forsook the city of Tirion upon Tuna and dwelt thereafter upon the mountain of Manwë, or about the plains and woods of Valinor, and became sundered from the Noldor. But the memory of Middle-earth under the stars remained in the hearts of the Noldor, and they abode in the Calceria, in the hills and valleys, in the sound of the western sea. And though many of them went often about the land of Valar, making far journeys in search of the secrets of the land and water and all living things, yet the people of Tuna and Alquande drew together in those days. Finwë was the king in Tirion and Olwe in Alqualande, but Ingwe was never held the high king of all elves. He abode thereafter at the feet of Manwë upon Tanquel Till. Feanor and his sons abode seldom in one place for long, but travelled far and wide upon the confines of Valinor, even going out to the borders of the dark and the cold shores of the outer sea, seeking the unknown. Often they were guests in the halls of Elwë, but Celegorm went rather to the house of Orome, and there he got great knowledge of birds and beasts, and all their tongues he knew. For all living things that are or have been in the King of Arda, save only the fell and evil creatures Melkor, lived then in the lands of Aman. And there also were many other creatures that have not been seen upon Middle-earth, and perhaps never now shall be, since the fashion of the world was changed. That was the end of chapter 5. Wow, I forget how much of a mouthful reading this is, but it's fun in a mind-breaking way. Alright, chapter 6 of Feanor and the Unchaining of Melkor. Oh no. Let me take a drink of water. It's so wordy. Now the three kindreds of the Eldar were gathered at last in Valinor, and of course, as soon as I take a drink, something is in my throat. Ugh. There we go. Hopefully that's good. Now the three kindreds of the Eldar were gathered at last in Valinor, and Melkor was chained. This was the noontide of the Blessed Realm, and the fullness of its glory and its bliss, long in tale of years, but in memory too brief. In those days, the Eldar became full-grown in stature of body and of mind, and the Noldor advanced ever in skill and knowledge, and the long years were filled with their joyful labors, in which many new things fair and wonderful were devised. Then, It was that the Noldor first bethought them of letters, and Rumil of Tirion was the name of the lore master who first achieved fitting signs for the recording of speech and song, some for graving upon metal or in stone, others for drawing with a brush or with pen. In that time was born in Eldamar, in the house of the king in Tirion upon the crown of Tuna, the eldest of the sons of Finwë, and most beloved. Finwë was his name, and by his mother he was called Feanor, Spirit of Fire, and thus he is remembered in all the tales of the Noldor. Miriel was the name of his mother, who was called Serinde. Okay, that's a nickname. Okay. Miriel was the name of his mother, who was called Serinde, because of her surpassing skill in weaving and needlework, for her hands were more skilled to finesse than any hands even among the Noldor. The love of Finwë and Miriel was great and glad, for it began in the blessed realm in the days of bliss, but in the bearing of her son Miriel was consumed in spirit and body, and after his birth she yearned for release from the labor of living, and when she had named him, she said to Finwë, "Never again shall I bear child, for strength that would have nourished the life of many has gone forth in Feanor." Oh, she had a really, really rough labor and birth. Oh, poor lady. Then Finwë was grieved, for the Noldor were in the youth of their days, and he had desired to bring forth many children into the bliss of Aman, and he said, "Surely there is healing in Aman. Here all weariness can find rest." But when Miriel languished still, Finwë sought the counsel of Manwë, and Manwë delivered her to the care of Irmo and Lorien. As their parting for a little while, as he thought, Finwë was sad, for it seemed an unhappy chance that the mother should depart and miss the beginning, at least of the childhood days of her son. "It is indeed unhappy," said Miriel, "and I would weep if I were not so weary. But hold me blameless in this, and in all that may come after." She went and then to the gardens of Loren and laid down to sleep. But though she seemed to sleep, her spirit indeed departed from her body, and passed in silence to the halls of Mandos. The maidens of Este tended to the body of Muriel, and it remained unwithered, but she did not return. Then Finwë lived in sorrow, and he went often to the gardens of Loren, and sitting beneath the silver willows beside the body of his wife, he called her by her names. But it was unavailing, and alone in the blessed realm he was deprived of joy. After a while he went to Loren no more. That's depressing. Her body couldn't handle the child birth, so she eventually just passed. But her body didn't decay. Wow. All his love he gave thereafter to his son, and Feanor grew swiftly, as if a secret fire were kindled within him. He was tall, and fair of face, and masterful, and his eyes piercingly bright, and his hair raven dark in the pursuit of all his purposes, eager and steadfast. Few ever changed his courses by counsel, none by force. He became of all the Noldor, then and after, the most subtle in mind, and the most skilled in hand. In his youth, bettering the work of Rumil, he devised those letters which bear his name, and which Eldar used ever after, and he was also who, first of the Noldor, discovered how gems greater and brighter than those of the earth might be made with skill. The first gems that Feanor made were white and colorless, but being set under starlight they would blaze with blue and silver fires brighter than Helluin. And their crystals he made also, wherein things far away could be seen small but clear, as with the eyes of the eagles of Manwë. Seldom were the hands and mind of Feanor at rest. While still in his early youth he wedded Nerdaniel, the daughter of a great smith named Matan, who among those of Noldor took most dear to Elwë, and of Mahatan he learned much of the making of things in metal and stone. Nerdanel was firm of will, but patient with Fëanor, more patient than Fëanor, desiring to understand minds rather than master them. And at first she restrained him when the fire of his heart grew too hot, but his later deeds grieved her, and they became estranged. 7 sons she bore to Fëanor, her mood she bequeathed in part to some of them, but not all. Now it came to pass that Finwë took as his second wife Indis the Fair. She was a Vanya, close kin of Ingwe the High King, golden hair and tall, and in all ways unlike Muriel. Finwë loved her greatly, and was glad again, but in the shadow Muriel did not depart from the house of Finwë, nor from his heart, and of all whom he loved Fëanor had ever the chief share of his thought. Okay. What a hard way to say that he was hung up on his ex. Now it came to pass that Finwë took as his second... Oh, and I already read that. The wedding of his father was not pleasing to Fëanor. He had no great love for Indis, nor for Fingolfin and Finfarin and her sons. He lived apart from them, exploring the land of Aman, or busying himself with the knowledge and the crafts in which he delighted, in those unhappy things which later came to pass, in which Fëanor was the leader. Many saw the effect of his breach within the house of Finwë, judging that if Finwë had endured his loss and been content with the fathering of his mighty son, the courses of Fëanor would have been otherwise, and great evil may have been prevented. For the sorrow and strife in the house of Finwë was graven in the memory of Noldoran elves. But the children of Indis were great and glorious, and their children also, and if they had not lived in the history of Eldar would have been diminished. Now, even while Fëanor and the craftsmen of Noldor worked with delight, foreseeing no end to their labors, and while the sons of Indis grew to their full stature, the noontide of Valinor was drawing to its close. For it came to pass that Melkor, as the Valar had decreed, completed the term of his bondage, dwelling for 3 ages in the duress of Mandos, alone. At length, as Manwë promised, he was brought up again before the thrones of Valar. Then he looked upon their glory and their bliss, and the envy was in his heart. And he looked upon the children of Iluvatar that sat at the feet of the mighty, and hatred filled him. He looked upon the wealth of bright gems, and he lusted for them. But he hid his thoughts and postponed his vengeance. Really, dog? You gonna come in here, make weird sounds, and then walk away? Alright. Before the gates of Valimar, Melkor abased himself at the feet of Manwë and sued for pardon, vowing if he might be made only the least of the free people of Valinor, he would aid the Valinor in all their works, and most of all in the healing of the many hurts that he had done to the world. And Nina added to his prayer, but Mandos was silent. Then Manwë granted him pardon, but the Valinor would not yet suffer him to depart beyond their sight and vigilance, and he was constrained to dwell within the gates of Valmor. But fair seeming were all the words and deeds of Melkor in that time, and both the Valar and Eldar had profit from his aid and counsel, if they sought it. And therefore, in a while he was given leave to go freely about the land, and it seemed to Manwë that the evil of Melkor was cured. For Manwë was free from evil and could not comprehend it, and he knew that in the beginning, in the thought of Iluvatar, Melkor had been even as he, and he saw not to the depths of Melkor's heart. And he did not perceive that all love had departed from him forever. But Ulmo was not deceived, and Tulkas clenched his hands whenever he saw Melkor his foe go by. For if Tulkas is slow to wrath, he is also slow to forget. But they obeyed, and the judgment of Manwë, for those who will defend authority against rebellion must not themselves rebel. Now in his heart Melkor most hated the Eldar, both because they were fair and joyful, and because in them he saw the reason for the arising of the Valar and his own downfall. Therefore, all the more did he feign love for them and seek their friendship, and he offered them the service of his lore and labor in any great deed that they would do. The Vanyar, indeed, held him in suspicion, for they dwelt in the light of the trees and were content, and to the Telari he gave himself small heed, thinking them of little worth, tools too weak for his designs. But the Noldor took delight in the hidden knowledge that he could reveal to them, and some hearkened to the words that it would have been better for them to have never heard. Melkor, indeed, declared afterwards that Fëanor had learned much art from him in secret, and had been instructed by him in the greatest of all of his works. But he lied in his lust and his envy, for none of the Eldale had ever hated Melkor more than Fëanor, son of Finwë, who first named him Morgoth, and snared though he was in the webs of Melkor's malice against the Valar, he held no converse with him, and took no counsel from him. For Fëanor was driven by fire of his own heart only, working ever swiftly and alone, and he asked the aid and sought the counsel of none that dwelt in Aman, great or small, save only for a little while of Nerdanel the Wise, his wife. Melkor's like, yeah, he totally learned shit from me, and Fëanor's like, fuck you, I only listen to my wife. I ain't listen to nobody except my wife. Respect. I respect the guy who, is like, I don't listen to fucking no one. I ain't doing shit. And then his wife's like, hey, honey, can you go do the dishes? He's like, oh, yeah, sure, babe. Good shit. That, but in elf terms. I think elf. Alright, Chapter 7 of the Silmarils and the Unrest of Noldor. Alright. In that time were made those things that afterwards were the most renowned in all of the works of the elves. For Fëanor, being come to his full might, was filled with a new thought, or may be that somehow the shadow of foreknowledge came to him of the doom that drew near, and he pondered how the light of the trees, the glory of the blessed realm, might be preserved imperishable. Then he began a long, secret labor, and he summoned all his lore, his power, and his subtle skill, and at the end of all he made the Silmarils. Okay, I'm looking at the spelling. It's very similar to Silmarillion. Interesting. As the three great jewels they were in form, but not until the end, when Fëanor shall return to who perished ere the sun was made, and sits now in the halls of awaiting, and comes no more among his kin, not until the sun passes and the moon falls, shall it be known of what substance they were made. Like the crystals of diamonds it appeared, and yet was more strong than adamant, so that no violence could mar it or break it within the kingdom of Arda. Yet that crystal was to the Silmarils but as the body of the children of Iluvatar, the house of its inner fire, that is within it, and yet in all parts of it, and is its life. And the inner fire of the Silmarils Fëanor made of the blended light of the trees of Valinor, which lives in them yet, though the trees have long withered and shine no more. Therefore, even in the darkness of the deepest treasury of the Silmarils of their own radiance shone like the stars of Varda, and yet, as they were indeed living things, they rejoiced in light and received it and gave it back to the hues more marvelous than before. All who dwelt in Aman were filled with wonder and delight at the work of Fëanor, and Varda hallowed the Silmarils, so that thereafter no mortal flesh, nor hands unclean, nor anything of evil might touch them, but it was scorched and withered, and Mandos foretell that the fates of Arda, earth, sea, and air lay locked within them. The heart of Fëanor was fast bound to these things that he himself had made. Then Melkor lusted for the Silmarils, and the very memory of their radiance was a gnawing fire in his heart. From that time forth, inflamed by his desire, he sought ever more eagerly to show how he should destroy Fëanor and the end of the friendship of the Valar and Elves, but he dissembled his purposes with cunning, and nothing of his malice could yet be seen in the semblance that he wore. Long was he at work, and slow at first, and barren was his labor. But that he sows lies in the end shall not lack of harvest, and soon he may rest from the toil indeed, while others reap and sow in his stead. Ever Melkor found that some ears would heed him, and some tongues that would enlarge what they had heard, and his lies passed from friend to friend, as secrets of which the knowledge proves the teller wise. Bitterly did the Noldor atone for the folly of their open ears in the days that followed after. When he saw that many leaned towards him, Melkor would often walk among them, and amid his fair words others were woven, so subtly that many who heard them believed in recollection that they arose from their own thought. Visions that he would conjure into their hearts of mighty realms that they could have ruled at their own will, in power and freedom in the east, and then whispers went abroad that the Valar had brought the Eldar to Aman because of their jealousy, fearing that the beauty of the Quendai and the Maker's power that Ilúvatar had bequeathed to them would grow too great for the Valar to govern, as the elves waxed and spread over the lands of the world. In those days, moreover, the Valar knew indeed of the coming of men that were to be. The elves as yet knew not of it, for Manwë had not revealed it to them. But Melkor spoke to them in secret of mortal men, seeing how the silence of the Valar might be twisted in evil. Little he knew yet concerning men, for engrossed in his own thought and the music he had paid small heed to the third theme of Ilúvatar. But now the whisper went among the elves that Manwë had held them captive, so that men might come and supplant them in the kingdoms of Middle-earth, for the Valar saw that they might more easily sway a short-lived and weaker race, defrauding the elves of the inheritance of Ilúvatar. Small truth there was in this, and little did the Valar ever prevailed to sway the wills of men, but in many of the Noldor believed or half-believed the evil words. So, elves don't know that the humans are coming, but Melkor obviously does. He starts telling the elves, and they start getting suspicious. Alright. Thus ere the Valar were aware, the peace of Valinor was poisoned. The Noldor began to murmur against them, and many became filled with pride, forgetting how much of what they had and knew came to them in the gift from the Valar. Matt. Suspicious of these. Oh my god. I'd say I'm reading you like a book, but Fiercest burned the new flame of desire for freedom and wider realms in the eager heart of Fëanor. And Melkor laughed into secrecy, for to that mark his lies had been addressed, hating Fëanor above all, and lusting ever after the Silmarils, but these he was not suffered to approach. For though at great feast Fëanor would wear them blazing on his brow, other times they were guarded close, locked in the deep chambers of his hoard in Tirion. For Fëanor began to love the Silmarils with greedy love, and grudged the sight of them to all save his father and his 7 sons. He seldom remembered now that the light within them was not his own. High princes were Fëanor and Fingolfin, and the elder sons of Finwë, honored by all in Aman, but now they grew proud and jealous, each of his rights and possessions. Then Melkor set new lies abroad in Eldamar, and whispers came to Fëanor and Fingolfin and his sons were plotting to usurp the leadership of Finwë and the elder line of Fëanor, and to supplant them by the leave of the Valar, for the Valar were appeased that the Silmarils lay in Tirion and were not committed to their keeping. But Fingolfin and Finfarin, it was said, beware, small love has the proud son of Muriel ever had for the children of Indus. Now he has become great, and he has his father in his hand, and it will not be long before he drives you forth from Tuna. And when Melkor saw that these lies were smoldering, and that pride and anger were awake among the Noldor, he spoke to them concerning weapons, and in that time the Noldor began the smithing of swords and axes and spears. Shields also they were made, displaying the tokens of many houses and kindreds that vied one with another, and these only they wore abroad, and of other weapons they did not speak, for each believed that he alone had received the warning. And Fëanor made a secret forge, of which not even Melkor was aware, and there he tempered fell swords for himself and his sons, and made tall helms with plumes of red. Bitterly did Matan rue the day when he taught the husband of Nerdanel all the lore of metalwork that he had learned in Alu. Matt, did you not fucking hear earlier me losing my shit over the fact that a town was called Tuna? I'm not even joking. We had to deal with the city of Tuna and the Lonely Isle, and I was trying so hard to keep it together. Thus, with lies and evil whisperings and false counsel, Melkor kindled the hearts of Noldor to strife, and their quarrels came at length the end of high days of Valinor and the evening of its ancient glory. For Fëanor was now openly to speak the words of rebellion against Valar, crying aloud what he would depart from Valinor back to the world without, and would deliver from the Noldor from Daladom, that they would follow him. Then there was unrest in Tirion, and Finwë was troubled, as he was summoned all his lords to council. But Fingolfin hastened to his halls and stood before him, saying, King and father, wilt thou not restrain the pride of our brother, Cruin Finwë, who is called the Spirit of Fire, all too truly? By what right does he speak for all our people, as if he were king? Thou was, too long ago, spoke before the Quendai, bidding them to accept the summons of the Valar to Aman. Though it was that led the Noldor upon the long road through the perils of Middle-earth to the light of Eldamar, if thou dost not now repented, 2 sons at least thou hast to honor thy words. But even as Fingolfin spoke, Fëanor strode into the chamber, and he was fully armed, his high helm upon his head, and at his side a mighty sword. So it is, even as I guessed, he said. My half-brother would be here before me. My half-brother would be before me with my father, in this as in all other matters. Then, turning upon Fingolfin, he drew his sword, crying, Get thee gone! Take thy due place! Fingolfin bowed before Finwë, and without a word or glance to Fëanor went from the chamber. But Fëanor followed him, and at the door of the king's house he stayed him, and the point of his bright sword he set against Fingolfin's breast. See, half-brother, he said, this is sharper than thy tongue. Try but once more to usurp my place in the love of my father, and it will rid the Noldor of one who speaks to be the master of thralls. These words were heard by many, for the house of Finwë was in the great square beneath the Mindon. But again Fingolfin made no answer, and passing through the throng in silence, he went to seek Finfarin, his brother. Now the unrest of the Noldor was not indeed hidden from the Valar, but its seed had been sown in the dark, and therefore, since Fëanor first spoke openly against them, they judged that he was the mover of discontent, being eminent in self-will and arrogance, though all the Noldor had become proud. And Manwë was grieved, but he watched and said no word. The Valar had brought the Eldar to their land freely, and to dwell or to depart, though they might judge departure to be folly, they might not restrain from it. But now the deeds of Fëanor could not be passed over, and the Valar were angered and dismayed, and he was summoned to appear before them at the gates of Valmar, to answer for all his words and deeds. There were also summoned all others who had any part in this matter, or any knowledge of it, and Fëanor, standing before Mandos in the Ring of Doom, was commanded to answer all that was asked of him. Then, at last, the root was laid bare, and the malice of Melkor revealed. And straightway Tulkas left counsel to lay hands upon him, and bring him again to judgment. Oh my god. Like, instantly Tulkas was like, alright, where's that fucker? I'm throwing hands. Where is him? Where is his ass? I'ma kick it. I'ma beat his ass. This is so funny. I love Tulkas. Oh my gosh. Is that a stand-in for Tolkien? I love that it's Tulkas. But homie literally is just like, alright, time to throw hands. I also need to look up, I think. Man, is this the appendix or is it? No, I need the names. Index of names. I just need to double check something because I don't want to be wrong. Okay, Manwë is the chief of the Valar. Okay. And then, because I know Aloran is Gandalf. Oh. Maya, one of the Istari. Mithrandir, Gandalf. Yeah. Okay. Homie, 3 hands. Okay. But Fëanor was not held guiltless, for he it was that had broken the peace of Valinor and drawn his sword upon his kinsman. And Mandos said to him, Thou speakest of thraldom. If thraldom it be, thou cannot escape it. For Manwë is the king of Arda, and not of Aman only, and this deed was unlawful whether in Aman or not in Aman. Therefore this doom is now made. For 12 years thou shalt leave Turon where this threat was uttered, and in that time take counsel with thyself, and remember who and what thou art. But after that time this matter shall be set in peace and held redressed if others will release thee. Then Fingolfin said, I will release my brother. But Fëanor spoke no word in the answer, standing silent before the Valar, then turned and left the council and departed from Valmar. With him into banishment went his 7 sons. Northward in Valinor they made strong place and treasury in the hills, and there at Formenos a multitude of gems were laid in hoard, and weapons also, and the Silmarils were shut into a chamber of iron. Thither also came Finwë the king, because the love that he bore to Fëanor, and Fingolfin ruled Noldor and Tirion. Thus the lies of Melkor were made true in seeming, though Fëanor by his own deeds had brought this thing to pass, and the bitterness of Melkor had sown endured, and lived still long afterwards between the sons Fingolfin and Fëanor. Now Melkor, knowing that his devices had been revealed, hid himself and passed from place to place as a cloud in the hills, and Tulkas sought for him in vain. Then it seemed to the people of Valinor that the light of the trees was dimmed, and the shadows of all standing things grew longer and darker in that time. It is told for a time Melkor was not seen again in Valinor, nor was any rumor heard of him, until suddenly he came to Formenos and spoke with Fëanor before his doors. Friendship he feigned with cunning argument, arguing his former thought of flight from the trembles of the Valar. He said, Behold the truth of all I've spoken, and thou art banished unjustly, but for the heart of Fëanor is yet free and bold as his words in Tirion, that I will aid him, and bring him far from this narrow land. For am I not Valar also? Yea, and more than those who sit in the pride in Valmar, and I have ever been a friend to the Noldor, most skilled and valiant of the people of Arda. Now Fëanor's heart was still bitter in his humiliation before Mandos, and he looked at Melkor in silence. pondering if indeed he might yet trust him so far as to aid him in his flight. And Melkor, seeing that Fëanor wavered, and knowing that Silmarils held his heart in thrall, said at last, "Here is a strong place, and well guarded, but think not that Silmarils will lie safe in any treasury within the realm of Valar." But his cunning overreached his aim, and his words touched too deep, and awoke a fire more fierce than he designed. And Fëanor looked upon Melkor with eyes that burned through his fair semblance and pierced the cloaks of his mind, perceiving there his fierce love for the Silmarils. Then hate overcame Fëanor's fear, and he cursed Melkor and bade him to be gone, saying, "Get thee gone from my gate, thou gel crow of Mandos!" And he shut the doors of the house in the face of the mightiest of all the dwellers of Ea. Then Melkor departed in shame, for he himself in peril, and he saw not this time yet for revenge, but his heart was black with anger, and Finwë was filled with great fear, and in the haste he sent messengers to Manwë and Valmar. Now the Valar were sitting in council before their gates, fearing the lengthening of the shadows. When the messengers came from foremost, at once Orome and Tulkas sprang up, but even as they set out in pursuit, the messengers came from Eldamar, telling Melkor that he had fled through the Kalakara, and from the hill of Tuna the elves had seen him pass in wrath as a thundercloud. And they said that thence he had turned northward, for the Telari in Alqualunde had seen his shadow going by their haven towards Araman. Thus Melkor departed from Valinor, and for a while the two trees shone again unshadowed, and the land was filled with light. But the Valar sought in vain for the tidings of their enemy, and as a cloud far off that looms ever higher, borne upon a slow cold wind, a doubt now marred the joy of all the dwellers in Aman, dreading they knew not what evil that yet might come. Ooh, lots of words. Also, fuck that motorcycle. Ugh. We're to chapter 8 already, though. I think I read for 2 hours last time. I think I'm only going to go to about 6 o'clock this time. And then I will change the stream to something else, because I don't want to completely just wreck my voice. I'm planning on doing another stream tomorrow, because it sounds like Mugen is going to be dropping a video on Pirate Software, and I want to react and watch that. So, stream tomorrow. Not exactly sure on the time, because it's not my normal stream day. There will be a stream tomorrow. Alright. When Manwë heard of the ways that Melkor had taken, it seemed plain to him that he purposed to escape to his old strongholds in the north of Middle-earth, and Orome and Tulkas went with all speed northward, seeking to overtake him if they might. But they found no trace or rumor of him beyond the shores of Telleri, in the unpeopled wastes that drew near to the ice. Therefore, the watch was redoubled along the northern fences of Aman, but to no purpose. For ere ever the pursuit set out, Melkor had turned back, and had secretly passed away far to the south, for he was yet as one of the Valar, and could change his form, or walk unclad, as could his brethren, though that power he was soon to lose forever. Thus unseen, he came at last to the dark region of Avathar, that narrow land that lay south of the Bay of Eldamar, beneath the eastern feet of Pelori, and its long and mournful shores stretched away into the south, lightless and unexplored. There, beneath the sheer walls of the mountains and cold dark sea, the shadows were deepest and thickest in the world. And there, in Avathar, secret and unknown, Ungoliant had made her abode. The Eldar knew not whence she came, but some have said that in ages long before she settled descended from the darkness that lies about Arda, when Melkor first looked down in envy upon the kingdom of Manwë, that in the beginning she was one of those corrupted to his service. But she had disowned her master, desiring to be a mistress of her own lust, taking all the things to herself to feed her emptiness, and she fled to the south, escaping the assaults of the Valar and the hunters of Orome, for the vigilance that had ever been to the north and the south was long unheeded. Thence she had crept towards the light of the blessed realm, for she hungered for light and hated it. In a ravine she lived, and took the shape of a spider, monstrous form. Wait. Ungoliant? A spider? Wait. Wait, is this the spider that attacks Frodo in the third movie? Oh, I can't remember its name. Sheila or something like that. Maybe it's like they're either their mother or them, but after time. Okay. As a spider of monstrous form, weaving her black webs in a cleft of the mountains. There she sucked up all the light that she could find, and spun it forth again in dark nets of strangling gloom, until no light more could come to her abode, and she was famished. Now Melkor came to Avathar and sought her out, and he put on again the form that he had worn as the tyrant of Utumno, a dark lord, tall and terrible. In that form he remained ever after. There, in the black shadows, beyond the sight even of Manwë in its highest halls, Melkor with Ungoliant plotted his revenge. When Ungoliant understood the purpose of Melkor, she was torn between lust and great fear, for she was loath to dare the perils of Oman and the power of the dreadful lords, and she would not stir from her hiding. Therefore Melkor said to her, "Do as I bid, and if thou hunger still when all is done, then I will give thee whatsoever thy lust may demand. Yea, with both hands." Lightly he made his vow, as ever he did, and he laughed in his heart. Thus did the great thief set his lure for the lesser. Okay, but why would you have to say with both hands? I know this was written years ago, but my dude just told a lady, "I'll give you whatever you want, I'll even use both hands." Brother. Okay, we're fine. I need to focus. That's not what this means. That's not what this... Matt, you're not helping. Matt, you're not helping. Oh my god. Okay. A cloak of darkness she wove about them when Melkor and Ungoliant set forth, and unlight, in which things seemed to be no more, and which eyes could not pierce, for it was void. Then slowly she wrought her webs, rope by rope, from cleft to cleft, from jutting rock to pinnacle of stone, ever climbing upwards, crawling and clinging, until at last she reached the very summit of Hyarmentir, the highest mountain in that region of the world, far south of the great Tanquetel, where the Valar were not vigilant, for west of Pelori was an empty land in twilight, and eastward the mountains looked out, save for forgotten Avathar, upon only dim waters of a pathless sea. But now upon the mountain top dark Ungoliant lay, as she made a ladder of woven ropes and cast it down, and Melkor climbed upon it and came to that high place, and stood beside her, looking down upon guarded realm. Below them lay the woods of Orome, and westward, shimmering, the fields and pastures of Yavanna, gold beneath the tall wheat of the gods. But Melkor looked north, and he saw afar the shining plain, and the silver dromes of Valimar gleaming in the mingling of the lights of Telperion and Laurelin. Then Melkor laughed aloud, and leapt swiftly down the long western slopes, and Ungoliant was at his side, and her darkness covered them. Now was the time of the festival, as Melkor knew well. though all tides and seasons were at the will of Valar, and in the Valinor there was no winter of death. Nonetheless, they dwelt then in the kingdom of Arda, and that was but a small realm in the halls of Ea, whose life is time, which flows ever from the first note to the last chord of Eru, and even as it was then the delight of the Valar, as is told in the Annalunde, to clothe themselves as a vesture in the forms of the children of Iluvatar, so also did they eat and drink, and gather the fruits of Yavanna from Middle Earth, which under Eru they had made. Therefore Yavanna set times for the flowering and the ripening of all things that grew in Valinor. And at each first gathering of the fruits of Manwë made a high feast for the praising of Eru, when all the peoples of Valinor poured forth their joy in music and song upon Tenquil. And now was the hour, and Manwë decreed that a feast more glorious than any that had been held since the coming of Eldar to Aman. For though the escape of Melkor portended toils and sorrows to come, and indeed none can tell what further hurts would be done to Arda ere he could be subdued again, at this time Manwë designed to heal the evil that had arisen among Noldor, and all were bidden to come to his halls upon Taniquetel, I think, there to put aside the griefs that lay between their princes, and forget utterly the lies of their enemies. There came the Vynar, and there came the Noldor of Tirion, and the Maiar were gathered together, and the Valar were arrayed in their beauty and majesty, and they sang before Manwë and Varda in their lofty halls, or danced upon the green slopes of the mountain that looked west towards the trees. In the day the streets of the Valamar were empty, and the stairs of Tirion were silent, and all the land lay sleeping in peace. Only the Talari beyond the mountains still sang upon the shores of the sea, for they recked little of seasons and times, and gave no thought to the cares of the rulers of Arda, or the shadow that had fallen upon Valinor, for it had not touched them as yet. Only one thing marred the design of Manwë. Fëanor came indeed, for him alone Manwë had commanded to come, but Finwë came not, nor any others of the Noldor or Formenos, for said Finwë, while the ban lasts upon Fëanor my son, that he may not go to Tirton, I hold myself unkinged, and I will not meet my people. And Fëanor came not in the Ramnam festival, and he wore no ornament, neither silver nor gold, nor any gem. And he denied the sight of the Silmarils to the Valar and their Eldar, and left them locked in Formenos in their chamber of iron. Nevertheless, he met Fingolfin before the throne of Manwë, and was reconciled in word, and Fingolfin set at naught the unsheathing of the sword. For Fingolfin held forth his hand, saying, As I promised, I do now. I release thee, and remember no grievance. Then Fëanor took his hand in silence, but Fingolfin said, Half-brother in blood, full brother in heart, will now I be. Thou shalt lead, and I will follow. May no new grief divide us. I hear thee, said Fëanor, so be it. But they did not know the meaning that their words would bear. It is told that even Fëanor and Fingolfin stood before Manwë. There came the mingling of the lights, when both the trees were shining, and the silent city of Valamar was filled with the radiance of silver and gold, and in that very hour Melkor and Ungoliant came hastening over the fields of Valinor, as a shadow of black cloud upon the wind fleets over the small sunlit earth, and they came before the green mound Ezelobhar, Then the unlight of Ungoliant rose up, even to the roots of the trees, and Melkor sprang upon the mound, and with his black spear he smote each tree to its core, wounded them deep. Their sap poured from the earth as it were blood, and it was spilled upon the ground, but the Ungoliant sucked it up, and going then from tree to tree, she set her black beak to their wounds, till they were drained. And the poison of death that was in her went into their tissues and withered them, root, branch, and leaf, and they died. And still she thirsted, and going to the wells of Varda she drank them dry. Ungoliant belched forth black vapors as she drank, and it swelled to a shape so vast and hideous that Melkor was afraid. So the great darkness fell upon Valinor. Of the deeds of the day that much is told in the Alduin day. That Elmire of the Valinor made it and is known to all the Eldar, yet no song or tale contained all that grief or terror that then befell. The light failed, but the darkness that followed was more than loss of light. In that hour was made a darkness that seemed not lack of, but a thing of being of its own, for it was indeed made by malice out of light, and had power to pierce the eye, and enter heart and mind, and strangle the very will. Varda looked down from Tanaquil and beheld the shadow soaring up towards in sudden towers of gloom. Valmar had foundered in a deep sea of the night, and soon the holy mountain stood alone, a last island in a world that was drowned. All song ceased, there was silence in Valinor, and no sound could be heard, save only from afar there came on the wind through the pass of the mountains and the wailing of the Telari, like a cold cry of gulls, for it blew chill from the east in that hour, and the vast shadows of the sea were rolled against the walls ashore. But Manwë from his high seat looked out, and his eyes alone pierced through the night, until they saw a darkness beyond the dark, which they could not penetrate, huge but far away, moving now northward with great speed, and he knew that Melkor had come and gone. Then the pursuit was begun. The earth shook beneath the horses of the host of Orome, and the fire that was stricken from the hooves of Nahar was the first light that returned to Valinor. But soon as any came up with the cloud of Ungoliant, the riders of Valar were blinded and dismayed, and they were scattered, and they went they knew not whither, and the sound of Valamora faltered and failed, and Tulkas was as one caught in a black net at night, and he stood powerless, and beat the air in vain. But when the darkness had passed, it was too late. Melkor had gone whither, and he would, and his vengeance was achieved. Oh. Crazy. Okay. So, we just finished chapter 8. Let's see how long chapter 9 is. So, the real question is, do we do one more chapter before I stop? Or do we stop here? The next chapter is, okay, 86 to 103. Oh god, that's 20 pages. That's 20 pages. So I guess we stop here. Because I don't wanna kill my voice. Uno mas? It's 20 pages. It's 20 pages of that. And we started, the coming of, no, not coming of the elves. We started on 67 and we ended on 86. So we did about 20 pages in an hour. So the next chapter is pretty long. I mean, 20 pages isn't long, but it's long when you're reading fucking sentences like this. But hopefully I'll keep reading this in streams if people want me to. I don't know if people want me to. Okay. So, for anyone who's on YouTube, I'm actually gonna end the stream and then restart the stream really quick with a new info. But there's no point in me doing that on... Shut up! I just fucking broke my brain reading that. I'm trying really hard. So YouTube, thank you so much for watching and past, present, future. Hope to see you next time. Bye.